In the beginning of this video, I want to introduce you to two people. Because they are not composites or metaphors, they are descriptions of two measurable neurological and physiological states that any human being can occupy, and that produce categorically different relationships with the same external reality. The first person wakes up, and the day is already happening to him before he's made a single decision. Not dramatically, but quietly. A notification triggers a thought that triggers a mood that sets the tone for the next conversation, which sets the tone for the next decision, which shapes the quality of the next hour. He is not in crisis. He is functional, competent, often effective. But there's a specific quality to him experience that he has probably stopped noticing because it's so constant. He is always slightly behind the moment, always processing what just happened, preparing for what might happen next, reacting to a field of stimuli that arrives faster than he can consciously organize it. The second person occupies the same external reality, the same kind of morning, the same kind of demands, the same potential for disruption. And there's something different about the quality of him presence in it. Not calm in the sense of passive or removed, present in the sense of prior, as if he arrived in the moment slightly before it fully formed, rather than catching up to it after the fact. Decisions emerge from a different quality of internal state. Conversations carry a different texture. The same chaotic field produces different data for them, not because the chaos is less, but because the instrument reading it is calibrated differently. The difference between these two people is not personality. It's not discipline, intelligence, spiritual development, or luck. It is a measurable, documentable difference in the coherence state of one specific biological system, the heart, and the cascade of neurological, perceptual, and field-level consequences that flow from that difference. This video is about that difference. What it is, exactly. What the science says about how it works, and how to move, deliberately and repeatably, from the first state to the second. The universe doesn't pause for everyone, but there is a state, documented, measurable, reproducible, in which your relationship with time, with chaos, with the field of available possibilities shifts in a way that the people around you will notice before you fully have language for it yourself. That state begins in the heart, and the mechanism is more precise than anything the mainstream spiritual conversation has ever given it credit for. Here is a fact about your heart that your education almost certainly omitted, and that changes the entire framework for understanding what we're discussing. The heart has its own nervous system, not metaphorically, anatomically. The intrinsic cardiac nervous system contains approximately 40,000 neurons, sensory neurites, interneurons, motor neurons, capable of independent processing, learning, and memory. This system communicates with the brain through multiple pathways: neurological signals traveling up the vagus nerve, hormonal signals released directly into the bloodstream, mechanical pressure wave signals transmitted through the arterial system, and, most relevant to this conversation, the electromagnetic field signals. The heart generates the strongest electromagnetic field in the human body, measurably stronger than the brain's field by a factor of approximately 60 in terms of electrical activity, and up to 5,000 times stronger in terms of magnetic field. This field radiates outward from the body and is measurable with sensitive instruments at distances of several feet. It is not a metaphor for influence. It is a documented, physically measurable field that your body is broadcasting continuously into the space around you. Now here is where the HeartMath Institute's research, more than 30 years of peer-reviewed work published in established scientific journals, becomes directly relevant. Roland McCready and his colleagues at HeartMath documented with precision what happens to this electromagnetic field under different internal states. When the heart is operating in a state they call coherence, characterized by a smooth, sine wave-like heart rate variability pattern, the field becomes organized, measurably more ordered, more consistent, more capable of influencing the physiological state of other biological systems in proximity. When the heart is operating in incoherence, the jagged, erratic HRV pattern associated with stress, anxiety, frustration, the chronic low-grade reactivity of the first person in our contrast, the field becomes disordered. The signal is fragmented, and the cascade of consequences from that fragmentation runs through every system in the body simultaneously. Cortical inhibition reduces higher cognitive function. The immune system is suppressed. The hormonal environment shifts towards stress chemistry, and critically, the brain's ability to process incoming information accurately degrades. The first person in our contrast isn't just feeling reactive. Their biology is running reactive. The field they're broadcasting is incoherent, and the universe, which is a field responding to fields, reflects that incoherence back with precision. Before I go further, I need to address the zero-point field directly, because it deserves precise treatment rather than the vague invocation it usually receives in spiritual content. The zero-point field is a real concept in quantum physics. It refers to the lowest possible energy state of a quantum mechanical system, the energy that remains even at absolute zero temperature when all thermal motion has ceased. Far from being empty, the quantum vacuum is understood in modern physics to be seething with virtual particle activity, with fluctuations of energy that appear and disappear at timescales too brief to observe directly. Physicists Hal Puthoff and Bernard Heisch, among others, have proposed that this zero-point field may be the fundamental substrate from which matter and energy emerge. Not a background to reality, but its actual ground state. What this means for our conversation is not that consciousness commands the quantum vacuum like a remote control. That claim has no experimental support, and I won't make it. What it means is that if the zero-point field is the ground state of physical reality, then the question of how a coherent biological field interacts with that substrate is a genuinely open scientific question. Not settled. Not proven in either direction. Genuinely open. What is settled is that the coherent state of the heart produces measurable changes in the biological and perceptual field of the person running it. Those changes alter what information from the environment is processed, how that information is interpreted, and what actions emerge from that interpretation. Whether those changes interact with the zero-point field at a quantum level is a question physics hasn't resolved. Whether they produce a fundamentally different quality of engagement with reality is not a question. It's a documented finding. The universe pauses not because consciousness has magical command over physical law. It pauses because a coherent system interacts with the field of available possibilities from a different quality of signal, and different signals collapse different probabilities. That's not mysticism. That's the observer effect, applied honestly. Let's return to the first person and make the mechanism precise. He wakes up and within 90 seconds has checked his phone. The first notification is an email that requires a response he is not ready to give, or a news headline, or a social media interaction that carries a faint charge of comparison or anxiety that triggers a cortisol response. small, barely perceptible. But the HRV pattern shifts. The smooth sine wave of morning coherence becomes slightly more jagged. The body reads this as, the environment is not safe to relax into. Prepare immediately. The preparation is physiological, sympathetic nervous system activation, cortical blood flow subtly redirected from prefrontal processing toward threat response centers, digestive processes mildly suppressed, immune function slightly downregulated. Again, small, individually insignificant adjustments. The person feels fine. He is not in crisis. He is activated. Well, but activated for what exactly? For the environment that generated the activation, for a world that is slightly threatening, slightly demanding, slightly ahead of him. And because the brain is a prediction machine, because it is constantly building and refining a model of what the environment is and what it requires, that activation becomes self-confirming. The model says, this is a reactive environment. The filter says, prioritize data consistent with a reactive environment. The data prioritized is more evidence that the environment requires reaction. By midday, the first person has made dozens of decisions from this state. Not bad decisions, necessarily. Competent decisions. But decisions made from a physiological platform of low-grade coherence, which means decisions filtered through a nervous system that has been running threat detection since before breakfast, that has been processing the world through the narrow aperture of what needs to be managed, rather than the wide aperture of what is available. This is not a character flaw. It's a frequency, and it produces a specific quality of day, a specific quality of year, a specific quality of life, not because the person lacks intelligence or effort, but because the instrument he is using to navigate reality has been running in a degraded coherent state for so long that degraded coherence has become the baseline he can no longer perceive as a choice. The second person's day runs through the same external field, the same potential disruptions, the same demands, the same information environment. But what's different begins before the day starts. There is a practice, a brief, specific, physiologically precise that the second person runs before any external input reaches him. Not meditation in the vague sense, a targeted cardiac coherence protocol, a specific breathing rhythm that through vagal activation shifts the HRV pattern toward the smooth sine wave of coherence before the day's stimuli begin arriving. 5 minutes, sometimes less. The specifics matter and will cover them exactly. The physiological consequence of beginning the day in coherence, rather than in the reactive state. The first person entered by reflex. Prefrontal cortical function is enhanced. The full range of higher cognitive processing, creativity, strategic thinking, accurate emotional reading of situations, the capacity to notice non-obvious connections and opportunities is available. The immune system is not suppressed. The hormonal environment is running a different chemistry. The electromagnetic field the body is broadcasting is organized. And here is the part that the HeartMath research makes precise, and that everything else in this video builds on. A coherent heart field doesn't just affect the person running it. It affects the quality of information that the field receives from the environment. McCrady's research documented something remarkable, that the heart's electromagnetic field appears to receive and process information from the environment before that information reaches the brain through conventional sensory pathways. In controlled experiments measuring physiological responses to stimuli presented in random order, the heart showed preparatory responses to emotionally significant stimuli several seconds before they appeared, before the brain had received the information, and before the conscious mind had any way of knowing what was coming. If this finding holds, and it has been replicated across multiple controlled conditions, it suggests that a coherent heart is not just processing the present more effectively. It is, in some measurable sense, in contact with the field of what is about to emerge. That is what the universe pauses means in precise terms, not a metaphor, but a documentable shift in the quality of engagement between a coherent biological field and the information field it inhabits. The HeartMath Institute has documented and validated a specific protocol for inducing cardiac coherence, measurably, repeatably, in laboratory conditions. It has 3 components. Done in sequence, it shifts the HRV pattern toward coherence within 3 to 5 minutes in most people. With consistent daily practice, it begins to shift the resting baseline, the default state the heart returns to between active practices, within 4 to 6 weeks. Component 1. Heart-focused breathing. Shift your attention to the area of your heart, physically, not conceptually. Place a hand there if it helps anchor the attention. Begin breathing with a specific rhythm. Inhale for 5 to 6 seconds. Exhale for 5 to 6 seconds. The equal ratio is important. It creates the resonance frequency that produces coherent HRV in most people. The exhale activates the parasympathetic system. The rhythm creates oscillation. The oscillation, sustained, produces the smooth sine wave pattern that characterizes coherence. Do not breathe deeply in the sense of forcing expansion. Breathe gently, naturally, into the rhythm. The coherence comes from the rhythm, not from volume. Component 2. Heart-focused feeling. While maintaining the breathing rhythm, activate a genuine positive emotional state. Not performed positivity, a real memory or experience of appreciation, care, or ease. HeartMath's research is specific here. The emotional content matters. Neutral states produce moderate coherence. Genuine positive emotional states, specifically appreciation, care, and compassion, produce the deepest and most sustained coherence in the HRV data. The emotion amplifies the signal. The breathing establishes the rhythm. Together they produce coherence at both the physiological and electromagnetic field level. The key word is genuine. A performed memory of appreciation produces a different HRV signature than a real one. The body knows the difference. Use a real one. However small, the size of the appreciation is not the variable. The authenticity is. Component 3. Sustained presence. Hold the state for a minimum of 3 minutes before any external input, before the phone, before the news, before the demands of the day arrive. This window, brief as it is, establishes the physiological baseline from which the day begins. A nervous system that begins the day in coherence requires significantly more disruption to exit coherence than one that begins already reactive. Use this protocol 3 times daily for measurable results. Morning before any input, midday as a reset between demands, and evening as a transition out of the day's activation. Each session is 3 to 5 minutes, 9 to 15 minutes total. The compounding effect over weeks is what shifts the resting baseline, what moves coherence from something you practice to something you inhabit. Imagine someone who has been operating in chronic low-grade incoherence for years. Not dramatically, not visibly, just the standard background activation of a modern nervous system that has been running reactively since before they had a name for it. They begin the cardiac coherence protocol, not as a spiritual practice, but as a physiological intervention applied with daily precision. The first thing they notice, usually within the first week, is not an external change. It's a change in the quality of the gap between stimulus and response. A situation that previously triggered an immediate reactive response now has a half second of space in it, not through willpower, through biology. The prefrontal cortex, no longer suppressed by the stress chemistry of incoherence, reasserts its function as the gap between what happens and what you do about it. That gap is everything. Every decision made from inside that gap is a different quality of decision than one made from pure reflex. Every conversation entered from inside that gap carries a different quality of presence. Every opportunity that arrives in the environment of someone running coherence gets processed by a different filter than the one the reactive nervous system uses, one that is looking for possibility rather than threat, that notices different data, that responds to different signals as significant. By the end of the first month, people consistently report something that sounds, on the surface, like increased synchronicity. The right conversations arriving at the right time, the right information appearing before it was consciously sought, the quality of daily experience shifting in ways that feel disproportionate to the simplicity of the practice. This isn't synchronicity in the mystical sense. It's a coherent field receiving coherent data, a changed observer collapsing different probabilities, the same external world, read by a different instrument, producing a different quality of information. That's what the universe pausing looks like from the inside. Not silence, clarity. The difference between a radio tuned to static and one tuned precisely to the signal that was always there. Now let's get to the highlighted comment. This comment says, resonate with recount of observation experience and candid approach and answers coming to you. I had that very recent.
And in that moment, when your heartbeat no longer races to chase the world, but instead begins to move in quiet harmony with something deeper, everything changes. Time feels like it slows, not because the universe stopped, but because you finally did. You stopped forcing, you stopped resisting, you stopped trying to become, and simply allowed yourself to be. And that's when reality responds, not to your effort, but to your alignment. Because the quantum field doesn't react to noise, it responds to coherence. It listens when your mind, your body, and your heart speak the same language. So if it feels like life has paused, if everything around you has gone strangely still, don't panic. That silence is not emptiness. It's preparation. It's the universe recalibrating itself around the frequency you finally stepped into. And when it moves again, it won't just move for you, it will move through you. This isn't the end of your journey. This is the moment everything begins to unfold, exactly as it was always meant to.